Good morning everyone, happy Easter weekend. I'm going to make some wet bags this weekend. So I thought I'd jump on, show you guys how I do it. I don't necessarily use a pattern, I just made them to the size that I see fit for its purpose. So my wet bags, my pattern, my rectangles I should say, measure 30 centimeters by 35 centimeters in length. So I've got my zips and I'm just using really simple dress zips, birch ones, and I've made them, I've just trimmed off the end actually, and I think from memory they're about 10 and a bit inches, around about that size. And I've cut out just two pieces of fabric here. These are 2 inches long by 1 inch wide. And all I'm going to do is I've put them right sides together and I'm going to stitch across the line there. I use a 1 centimeter seam allowance for this part and then do the same on the other side. Now, technically you don't need to back stitch at these ones because when you go to sew it onto your wet bag, you're going to cover that anyway. It's really just habit for me to back stitch at the start and at the end, but again, not really necessary because you're going to be going over it anyway when you sew it to your main and your lining of the bag. So without further ado, let's start stitching. Okay, so now that we've got all our zips done, no, I haven't trimmed my threads, I don't bother. We're going to get started on constructing our wet bag. So I'm using a memory composite lining for the outer, and I have, like I said, they're 30 centimeters by 35. I've popped on a DTF, the front of them, and I'm using a 420D waterproof canvas for the lining. So 2 different fabrics, so these are all cut, ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is getting my very front piece, and I'm going to just make sure that I get my center, and when I center it I just cut a very teeny tiny notch there, and I get my zip, whichever one I'm going to get, and I do the same thing with my zip on both ends so that I know where the center is, so I know that it is placed central. So because I have a definite front and a definite back because of the image I've got on there, I obviously want mine to open from the left, I pull into the right, so I make sure my closed end zipper is pointing to the left, and I very simply just match up my notches to each one over here. I do prefer to use clips, I find it easier. I don't use any zip tape, double-sided tape to stick mine down. I don't find I need to in something like this, as long as I'm using some clips. Now there will be some overhang of your tabs, that's totally fine, you're going to sew them and cut them off anyway. With this way, I've used just a cotton waterproof canvas, so it's not so bulky compared to using a vinyl. So with a vinyl, if you're using synthetic leather, I wouldn't make my tabs like this. They would be I would construct them differently. So I've done that, that's my front. I'm then going to grab one of my lining pieces and I'm going to make sure that I put it right side down again. I don't necessarily need to mark my center here because all of my pieces are cut exactly the same. I'm just going to line it up with my main, and I've done that like so. So your zip is sandwiched in the middle. Now we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to stitch our zip in. You can use a zipper foot if you need to. I do find if you're using a bulkier zip, like a custom zip and a number 5, you're likely to need your zipper foot. With these dress zips, they're quite fine. I can just use my standard foot on this and just move my zipper foot as I need to. So let's go to the machine and get that done. Okay, so now that I have sewn my zip, so now I've sewn my zip to the front and I've got one lining piece attached, we're going to top stitch it. Now, some people like to top stitch their lining to their front so that it doesn't get caught in the zip. Other people find that they just need to top stitch their main piece down to their zip and they leave this out. It's purely up to you. I have done it both ways. I don't really have a preference. I generally don't have a problem with my zips ever getting caught in them. So it is up to you. Have a go at each way. Sometimes I've done them like this. You just need to bear in mind if you do top stitch your lining down as well. It is sometimes a great idea to just clip the bottom end so that you have got both quite taut so that there's no bulkiness left. If you're choosing not to top stitch your lining, then that's fine, you're just going to do that. Top stitching, I increase my stitch length to about a 4.5. I make sure that I use a thicker thread, a Gooderman thread. Top stitching thread is always handy to have. And top stitch, and we're good to go with our second part. Let's go. Okay, so my top stitching is now done. It's very tricky to see because I have colour matched my thread to my outer piece. I have done, yes, something a little bit bright and fancy on the outside. So we've done that part now, top stitch. We're ready to reverse the rolls now, and we're going to get our back piece of our fabric. And again, I don't need to find the centre of this because I'm going to just match it up with the front panel and make sure that my edges are all lined up. So we're going to match right sides together again now, and I'm going to clip it into place like so, and then I'm going to get my next piece of lining. So once we've placed this way, I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to do the same with our lining. We're going to make sure that we've got our right sides together. And with the 420D, there is a very slight colour variations as to the right side and the wrong side. Being the lining, no one's probably going to notice which way it is. However, with the memory composite, there is a clear difference as to which is the right way and the wrong way. So the right way is obviously the smooth, silky side, and the backing is black, so it's a totally different colour. So now I've got that done, I'm going to do the same thing on my sewing machine. I'm going to sew the zip to the second piece, and then I'm going to top stitch it. Okay, now that we've sewn our zip, we are now up to the final stages of construction. So we're going to line open up our pouch. We're going to, first thing we do, make sure that we open up our zip, because if you don't open up your zip, you've got no way of turning it through at the end, and you'll hit yourself for it later. I'm just going to trim my ends of my zipper tabs off, like so. I'm going to get just my main pieces, so my main front and my main back. And I'm just going to line up my bottom edges. I'm going to just pop one clip in there. And then I'm going to do my middles, making sure that my seams are lined up beautifully, and pop a clip in there, and then do the other side. Just make sure that whatever way you have it pushing towards on one side, it is the same on the other. So I have both of mine facing my main here, and then I'm going to just clip down, add in another couple of clips here, and then with my lining, I'm going to make sure that I leave a good sized gap. Put 2 clips on either side there, because that is where we are not going to sew. We're going to start at one and we're going to finish at the other, and we're going to make sure that we leave a decent enough gap so that our hands can fit in, so we can turn it out the right way. Remembering to back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and we're going to sew all the way across, down and round through our main panel, all the way down again, and we're going to finish at this second part, back stitching, and then we're ready to turn it out, ready for the final construction. one thing that I did forget to mention is when I sew over my joints here, I do an extra little back stitch, just to give it a little bit more strength, because that part is a little bit thicker. Back stitch a few times gives it a bit more strength, so it's unlikely to come through. Now once we're at here, I just trim off my corners as such, so that when I pull it out, it's nice and done. You can get some pinking shears and do the same on your edges. I don't find I need to on this kind of fabric. I would if I was using synthetic leather. Also at my gap here, I simply go like so. I cut that bit there, and I do trim this side here. Just a vertical little notch. And I will show you the reason why at the end. So I go towards my corner. So you'll end up with this kind of shape here. I find then when you go to fold it out, it works nice and neat. Now we're going to reach all the way in. We're going to pull out our bag. And see how I've left the gap in the lining a decent size. Makes it so much easier to birth. And now all I'm doing is I'm making sure that my corners are all the way out. You can use a little pokey tool if you need to. Just try not to poke through your sewing or your bag or your fabric. You certainly don't want that at this stage. I always find just getting my fingers in there first, and then I use that tool just to, it's called Purple Bang, and then you're going to reach in again, and now you're going to do the same thing to your main fabric pieces. You're going out, pushing it all the way through. You want to make sure that you have this all done before you close up your lining, because there is no way afterwards to do it. So just make sure that you get your corners pushed out as best you can, like so. And you're going to just push out where your zip tabs are on one side and over at the other side as well. So making sure that everything is pulled out before you go on to the next step, because once you close the lining, you'll have to reopen it to get anything out after that. And this part, see how this, now you've got your little fold, you simply pop those in that way. And I'm just going to clip one clip there. Just finger press that down, and then I'll put in another one at the end. And you can, if you want to, chop one in the middle. And now we're just going to top stitch that closed. Okay, now we can pop our lining into our bag. Seal the lining all up. Get some of that air out, and zip her up, and there is our wet bag. Perfect for our netball bits, so that they don't get soggy and wet after training nights and ready for game day, but purely just to keep the plastic away. And hopefully these will last a whole lot longer than the plastic bags. And I'm pretty happy with them.